What's happening, everybody? Welcome to the Paranormies Present, the Ahnenerbe Hour. I am Johnny Monoxide, and tonight I'm joined by Scott Taylor, and from the TRS radio show podcast, Dadcast, The Fatherland, we have Saul TC Mann. What's happening, bud?
Hey, good to be here.
I don't know. Thanks for coming on, man. What's up, Scott?
Hey, how's it going? Doing pretty good.
Right on. All right, so we got no emails, we got no donations, so but our email is paranormiespresent@gmail.com, and our PayPal for donations is paranormiespresent@gmail.com. Our Twitter is @theparanormies, and our Facebook page is the Paranormies Present, the Ahnenerbe Hour, and that's all the business we have for tonight. So, Salty, man, yeah, thanks for coming on. I know you had a couple things you wanted to talk about. One of them being Jaques Vallee, I believe his name is. That, am I pronouncing that correctly? Vallee?
Yeah, man, he's a fucking Frenchie. Well, yeah, you know, I'm a fan of the show. There's been many times when I've been listening and I've just been like screaming at the radio, wishing that I could, you know, be involved in the conversation, because paranormal, mostly related to like UFOs, and then some degree like ghosts and all that shit, have been a big like side interest of mine ever since I was a kid. And almost every topic that you touch on is something that I have at some point sat down and, you know, like read about for hours and hours and hours. But it may have been years and years ago. I mean, you know, you remember the show The X-Files? It was very popular.
Oh, of course.
Everybody knows that show, right? So that came out in like 1993, and I was still pretty young then, but like my parents would watch it and I would watch it, so I just kind of got hooked on all this stuff. And I remember going around to like my elementary school library and reading they had a surprisingly large amount of books on like ghosts. I think they had like Chariots of Fire by Eric von Daniken, you know. So I read all this shit before I was like 11 years old.
Oh, wow.
And I remember being on the internet back in like the mid to late 90s when you had like GeoCities and Angel Fire websites, and like, you know, with like little spinning UFO GIFs and like web rings, you know, and all this fucking,
I remember those.
All this hokey like Web 1.0 shit that's now long gone. But I would read, you know, pages and pages of stuff on all these various topics. And so it's always been a part of me, although I wouldn't call myself a true believer, but I mean, it's just a lot of fun, you know?
It definitely is.
I mean, it's interesting. Even if you don't believe in it, it's still a fun topic to read about.
Absolutely. So, yeah, this guy, Jaques Vallee, the reason why we're going to talk about him tonight is because he has done a lot of research into UFOs, the UFO phenomenon. And he's a big, he's a big proponent of, well, actually he's against what they call the extraterrestrial hypothesis, which, you know, it's a mouthful to say, but it's basically the idea that these lights in the sky, or these weird things that people see, either craft or, you know, entities, little gray men. It's the idea that they're actually from another planet, that they are interstellar beings, that they're traveling here in craft made of minerals, powered by some sort of exotic power source and propulsion. You know, that's a pretty easy concept for us to wrap our head around. And Jaques Vallee has done a lot of research documenting these phenomenon, and kind of pokes a lot of holes in that. And that's what we're going to talk about tonight. And Scott, you had more on his biography, didn't you?
Oh, yeah, I was just doing kind of research on him leading up to this show. I think he's a really interesting guy. Very professional, which is not something you can say about a lot of UFO researchers. He seems like he is really well put together. He's written not just UFO books, but he's written books on finance. He's written books on computer science. I think he helped with NASA stuff, if I'm not mistaken, back in the 60s and 70s. He's a multimillionaire, he's a venture capitalist. I think he started like 12 companies or something like that.
Oh, wow.
So this isn't some guy who's just a crank, sitting in his basement with like tinfoil hat on or something like that. Like, it's a professional guy, and it really shows in a lot of his books. I know John read the Passport to Magonia, and then I read another one of his that documents a lot of the different UFO phenomenons throughout history that he co-wrote with another guy whose name escapes me at the moment. Chris Aubeck. The book is called Wonders in the Sky. So what he seems to kind of want to do in a lot of his work is show that A, the UFO phenomenon is not recent, and B, there seem to be certain patterns that tend to crop up over and over throughout history whenever UFOs are spotted.
Yeah, he's a pretty legit dude, and that tends to give his work a lot of credibility. And especially, I got the impression that he was a doctor or a legitimate scientist. He I don't know if he actually holds a doctorate, but he applies the scientific method. When you're reading his books, you're like, okay, this is like legitimate, in the way that he's going about it.
Yeah, he's definitely professional. Yeah. He's got a master's degree in astrophysics. Okay. Excuse me. Yeah, and he's not quite a Neil deGrasse Tyson, but but he's white, so he's probably got 20 IQ points on him. No, but actually, like he when he moved to the United States, he actually when you said about NASA, he worked on NASA's first project, or the first Mars project, actually. And he got he did get he got a PhD later on here in the United States. In computer science. Yeah. So he is a doctor. So, he was one of the principal developers of the large NSF project of computer networking, which is like basically the first conferencing system.
He worked on ARPANET. Yeah, that's right. I remember
he was the ARPANET guy. Yep.
The predecessor to the internet today. So, I guess
wait. I thought Al Gore invented the internet.
Well, he did, but this guy helped.
He did. Al Gore invented the internet and also told us that polar bears can't swim. But it's weird because every time I go to the zoo, it's in the water. It's amazing. But he, like you're talking about how legit this guy was. He was on the National Advisory Committee for the University of Michigan College of Engineering, and he actually was one of the first in the development of artificial intelligence. Like, so the guy's legit. It's, like you said, he's not just some crank sitting in his basement with a tinfoil hat on. Yeah, he's very smart.
Big brain.
Yeah, huge brain. You hear that, Kurt Doolittle? Yeah. So I mean, the guy. Like I read, and by read, I literally just got the book a couple of days ago. I've read as much of it as I can. That the book's, it's a great book. I'm gonna go back and reread everything I've read and then finish reading the book. It's a great book. For being written as far back as it was, it's like it's gripping. Like even his writing style is great. So
yeah, it's a great book. It's called Passport to Magonia, and it's really well known amongst people who, I guess, are interested in the more legit and academic side of UFOlogy. And I would highly recommend anybody who's into this sort of thing pick it up. Johnny. Actually, it looked like he got like a first edition.
Dude, I got a first edition in first edition in like mint condition. I looked up how much people are selling. What's that?
Did you just pick that up at like a used bookstore?
Yeah.
Oh yeah, wow.
There's a used bookstore. I paid $30, but you can find them online for the low price of like 100, 150. 170. Like they're going for a lot more, if you can find a first edition. This even has the cover, and the cover is in like amazing condition. Like everything about the original book was $6.95. Yeah.
It's got some like cover art that looks like a Black Sabbath album, like early Sabbath.
It really does. Yeah. That's actually what it reminded me of.
It's like some 1969 psychedelic shit.
Yeah. I wonder if he was into psychedelics back then, but probably not though. Who knows? I don't know.
Yeah, because I have a newer version, and it's got a picture of like a gray alien, but on one hand he's holding a demon mask, and on the other he's holding like a jester mask. And, and that kind of embodies some of the argument that's put forth in the book. Yeah, it's a pretty big book. It's a really fun read, though. But about 50% of it is literally just a chronological rundown of UFO sightings and entity encounters, starting back, like, I think in the Middle Ages or even before. So that's kind of a fun catalog to reference. But the first half of the book is where he makes his arguments, and he uses, he gives examples. And so, yeah, I mean, the extraterrestrial hypothesis, right? Like, it's really easy to understand. And wasn't too long ago, it might have been on the Underground Bases episode, you outlined this kind of like general theory that is somehow pervasive. And it's so pervasive that it was, it's part of the movie Men in Black. It's like, well, you see, the aliens came here in 1945 after we set off the nuclear bombs, which attracted their attention. And then they landed and they made a treaty with Eisenhower. And they've been, working with the government and against the government ever since. I mean, and that's in a nutshell, right? Like that. But that's like super easy and simple to digest. And like I said, it's so, I don't know, it just it works so well with our frame of mind that it's even in mainstream movies. And everyone's like, oh, okay, yeah, sure, that makes sense.
Well, I think one of the reasons why it works so well is because it's a concept that most of us can grasp because we've seen flying things like airplanes and whatever. So, oh yeah, sure, they flew here from another planet. And the media, the media has purported this ever since the beginning of, I mean, when do you think sci-fi movies were started? Like the 50s or whatever, 40s? I mean, they're like,
yeah, they really came about after World War II for the most part. Like you've got some before, but the tone is totally different.
Right, and they've been pushing this, if you want to call it an agenda, ever since throughout Hollywood. And it makes sense that we would be able to, well, of course, the ship came here. You get into an airplane and fly to New York. It's the same sort of concept, just different craft.
Just better, yeah.
Better, faster, stronger, whatever. Yeah.
It fits into our paradigm, really easily understandable of technological progression being linear. That well, these people are just farther ahead on a scale of technology, so they have a craft that is made of a mineral and it consumes some sort of exotic material for propulsion and power.
Dilithium crystals.
Okay, yeah, or element 115, as the Bob Lazar famously revealed in 1991.
Oh right, yeah.
But another aspect of this is that it's like, okay, so it started at the end of World War II, and that kind of feeds into this like American narcissism of the 20th century of like, it wasn't until we kicked the Nazis' ass and saved the world that then the aliens wanted to come down and play with us. It in some way I think it feeds into that narcissism, that American exceptionalism.
Oh, it definitely does.
Point. And especially considering the first, not the actual first, but the supposed first real UFO encounter was at Roswell, New Mexico. So it's like, they came and visited the United States specifically.
Wasn't that 1947?
Yeah, that was 47.
I believe the first actual flying saucer sighting of the modern era was 1946, a man named Kenneth Arnold by Mount Rainier in Washington, my home state.
Well, there was also the Battle of Los Angeles, which didn't that happen during World War II?
That was like 1942 when the war was going really badly for the United States. And that's actually really interesting. There is a famous photograph of all these searchlights trained on something in the sky, and it certainly looks like there could be something there, but it's inconclusive. Yeah, but but the term flying saucer comes from 1946, but then you got the Roswell incident in 47. Yeah, and these things started happening, very frequent, very visible. I mean, I don't know what year it was. It was in either the late 40s or early 50s when the Washington, D.C. Air defense system picked up a bunch of UFOs, and they actually had to scramble fighters. And this was like front page news on the New York Times. You can find the archives. Washington, D.C. got buzzed by. It was over a couple weeks or days, a wave of sightings, and they were picked up on radar, and they had to scramble fighters, and they could never catch them. So I mean, yeah, it was a big deal, and that's kind of why we have this perception that this thing started right then at the end of the war, and that's usually correlated with the use of nuclear weapons.
Well, then you also have the German stories of the Foo Fighters.
Yeah, you do. And so, right, so that points to the fact that, okay, these things were happening prior. And as Jaques Vallee, describes in his book, in many different instances, there were a lot of things that happened that are very similar. So,
well, these go back. I mean, some of these cases they break down. I mean, as far as even prehistory, like there's some cases that are listed in his chart that go back like to BC times. So it's not like
the Romans were spotting UFOs.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, literally, there's one from 103 BC in Italy. They were reporting what appeared to be shields clashing in the sky. Now, the term shields is interesting there because if you think of a shield, especially a circular one, I think that's how somebody in 103 BC would describe a UFO.
Right.
I mean, they don't have...
Well, the Roman shields, were they round? Were they round back then?
I don't know. That's a good question. I think probably some were round and some were that like rectangular type thing that you see. I really don't know. But surely everyone back then knew what a round shield looked like. So it's interesting.
I think the Greeks used round shields. The Romans had the square one. So yeah, I mean, a round shield would certainly be a frame of reference.
Right.
Yeah, there was flaming spears and shields which moved in different directions and then clashed together as if they were formations in battle. So that doesn't sound to me like a meteor shower or something that has a natural explanation. It sounds to me like a UFO sighting that happened 100 years before Jesus was born. So to say that this is a recent phenomenon, it's not. There's literally hundreds and hundreds of these from all the way back to prehistory. And not just in Rome, not just in Europe, China as well recorded a lot of these UFO sightings.
Mm-hmm. India too. I mean, there's India has a lot of those paintings or whatever from whatever time. I don't know off the top of my head, but they're of things battles going on in the sky. That go back to prehistory. If you guys have seen the Ancient Aliens show, right? I mean, or at least heard. Yeah. And that, as much as I love it to watch it, it's that typical History Channel where they give you 75% or 70% fact, 20% complete tinfoil, and 10%, or you know what I mean, 10% complete bullshit, 20% slight misinformation. Yeah. I mean, because these things do exist, like these paintings, these carvings, these whatever, they do exist, and they come from however long ago. And they depict these certain things, but they're not exactly. They don't. They can't exactly be what they say they are.
Well, and see, that's a good point. Is because the Ancient Aliens and that all started with Eric von Daniken's Chariots of the Gods, which I've read. And
it's a great book, by the way.
Well, it's a book that everyone interested in this subject should read, but you have to take it with a big grain of salt. Because what my point here is, this thing changes nature based on your frame of reference, and your frame of reference is determined by your period in history, right? So we're looking at it and we're going, oh, this is aliens from another planet flying in, spaceships made out of metal. But a guy, 2,000 years ago is saying, this is demons, this is angels, or this is right. I was accosted in the forest by a bunch of strange little beings. This is fairies, And who's to say which one it actually is?
Yeah, definitely. I think that's something we've mentioned before, is the idea that aliens might not be aliens. They might be something else. And, who knows what they are. But something that bothers me about a lot of the UFO community is this idea that these aliens, or whatever they are these advanced beings who want to bring, love and light to the earth, and they're here for our benefit, and there's nothing else going on. It's just they're here to help us. And it almost seems to me like something that a being that wants to be worshipped, in a way, would say. In a lot of these sightings or encounters in the Wonders in the Sky book, a lot of them are religiously related, where people, like you said, they think they're demons, or they think they're the Virgin Mary or something like that, where this thing comes and it says, I have a message for people, and it's a little, I guess, fishy to me that people would have an encounter with something like this and automatically assume that it has the best intentions for you when honestly we don't even know what they are. Like, are they Nordic aliens from the Pleiades? Like, who knows?
It's funny that you're mentioning that, like the Nordic aliens and kind of this pantheon of various alien species and this idea of peace and love. And, this was all very popular in like the 70s. That's where a lot of this, the aliens are here to help us stuff comes from. And a lot of this came from people who did what they call like channeling, which to me is just total fucking bullshit. It was mostly hippy dippy people who would sit down, and they were like spirit mediums of the early 20th century. They would sit down and they would channel their alien friend and say, he wants to tell everyone to be nice and spread peace and love. And that's where a lot of that shit comes from. And
it sounds like something an unconscious hippie would say.
It really does. But are you saying that that Hillary Clinton doesn't channel Eleanor Roosevelt?
I don't know, man. She's a reptilian. Let's not forget.
Right. That's a whole. That's a whole other episode. Yeah, we haven't said that in a while. That's for another episode.
But what I'm saying here is like that was a very specific period of UFO history, the late 70s and early 80s. And you had like contactees. I have a message, and all this shit. And that you don't see that anymore. Like that's not a part of the modern UFO culture.
Right.
And the modern. Go ahead.
Well, I was going to say, that's where you have, what's that movie, Close Encounters of the Third Kind? Isn't that the late 70s, very early 80s, like 79, 78, something like that?
Yeah.
Yeah, with the alien, that they were playing that do-do-do-do-do. Like, that was like, right. And that message of peace and love. Yeah.
It's a pretty famous movie, and it's actually, it's pretty scary, part where the kid gets abducted. I mean, it's pretty wild.
Mm-hmm. It really is. I saw that when I was a kid. It scared the shit out of me. So.
Yeah, I saw it. I wasn't like that young, but I was probably not even not a teenager yet. And that's a very unsettling scene.
It really is. But then they followed it up with E.T., which is E.T. is a friend of kids. Like they followed it up with that, and it was a totally different direction that the alien, the E.T. question went.
Right, but so what I'm getting at here is that like the cultural feeling of the moment, of the decade or the era, will also tend to influence the way that the UFO phenomenon is reported and seen. Because then in the 80s and into the early 90s, you had, the Cold War was at its, final peak, and technology, high tech was, everywhere and apparent. And you had a lot of things like you had like the black triangles, and like Belgium in like 1990 or 91, you had a series of UFO flap where there was a lot of really good sightings, these black triangles. And, people were like really focusing in on Area 51, and you could see it from a couple mountaintops. So you had a bunch of groups of people out there were like, what is the government doing? And they'd camp out and look at the base. Those mountaintops were then annexed by the government, so you couldn't do it anymore. But so it changed, and it became this kind of dark, like, cloak and dagger. They're using the alien technology to build next generation, craft to fight the Russians. And then when the wall came down, and the Soviet Union fell apart, and then everyone thought there was going to be this disclosure, and there wasn't. And it was like, that's right about when the X-Files came out, and they finally did disclose that Area 51 existed in, like, I want to say it was Bill Clinton early in his first term, and the Air Force released Project Blue Book. And this is all early 90s shit that I remember, and because this stuff was huge. It was like front page, New York Times shit again. And it was a big part of the cultural zeitgeist of the moment. And it's really fallen into the background since then. And the extraterrestrial hypothesis is just stale. There's no new information on UFOs. There's nothing new. There's nothing happening. Like, these organizations like MUFON are now full of a bunch of old fuckers. Like, they're like, there's no life to it. Because there's nothing interesting going on. It's kind of like, okay, yeah, so they're in a spaceship, and we've still not been able to prove it at all for 60 years. So who cares?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's interesting in a way how even with that, it kind of almost reflects the nihilism of today. And it's like, who gives a shit? Like if UFOs can be said to follow kind of the culture of the times, no one cares anymore. And I think that's kind of the culture now, is just, no one cares about anything.
That's a really good point. So, like, part of the anti-ETH, concept would be that whatever this is changes its identity to match the expectations of mankind in that era. So if you imagine, what's it doing now? They're like, well, fuck, people don't care or believe in anything. What are we going to do?
Yeah,
Right.
I don't know. If I were an alien, I couldn't really, like, what would I even, like, appear as, or what would I try to be? Maybe UFOs are, I was going to make a joke, but I can't remember what those spinny things are called, so never mind.
Fidget spinners?
Yeah.
Fidget spinners? Yeah. It'll be a fidget spinner with the crying, laughing emoji on it.
Yeah.
Yeah. That'll get people going. Yeah. It'll be vaping while it's doing it. So.
Right.
Fuck, dude.
Exactly.
Can we just nuke it from space and start over? Like, literally.
Maybe.
But yeah. Well, if nukes existed, we could. Right, Weave?
Right.
But no, you're right. Like, that's the thing is, like, well, the past couple of years, even, well, I mean, I this is, I'm gonna like, reveal a little bit of my nerdiness. I used to go to the Northern California UFO Expo, or whatever the hell they call it, every year that they have in Palo Alto, California, and back when I was like Captain Conspiracy, and that's like all I was into, and that's where I met Henrik from Red Ice, which kind of got me in the direction that I'm in now. But all these people, they had, like Von Daniken was there. I met him. I met almost everybody that's been on Ancient Aliens. All those guys. Those people, I believe they seriously believe this stuff. I don't think that they're putting their information out there with the with the like falsely, like they're trying to deceive. Yeah, with the intent to deceive. Yeah, exactly. I really think that Giorgio Tsoukalos believes that it really was aliens. Like, I mean, like, if you ever hear the guy talk, he's absolutely insane. But I don't know, man. I don't think that this has. I just lost my train of thought. The craft thing, like, like with the like you were saying earlier, Salty, about how, like, people thought that they were like, were they reverse engineering alien stuff to do government, like military.
Yeah, and like that's where we supposedly got computers from, and
right, yeah,
transistors and all.
Well, that's the theory. It's like, well, we didn't just go from tubes to transistors by ourselves. We had help,
Yeah. No, I don't know. I mean, maybe not. I mean, the other thing is, you can't say for certain that some of it might be extraterrestrial and some of it might have some other origin. Like, there's not necessarily a one-to-one correlation or a fit between the phenomena and the explanations for the phenomena. Like, it could be partially extraterrestrial. It could be partially some sort of supradimensional type of thing, So,
well, that's the other thing.
Maybe
speaking of supradimensional,
Roswell, and
I was gonna say, speaking of supradimensional, isn't there? That's what Jaques Vallee was saying about the fact that they may not necessarily be, interstellar craft, but they might be interdimensional beings. Where,
right.
They don't actually, like Salty, you were saying, they don't actually fly a craft that takes a fuel that goes a distance. They literally, like fold up the universe and step through a doorway, kind of a thing, interdimensional.
Right, but like what's the difference between a demon and an interdimensional being?
Well, there isn't one, really.
I mean, yeah.
Like, is there one?
Like,
I mean, it's just
based off
semantics,
malicious
really.
intent, I would assume. But I mean, who's to say what their intent is?
Demon has a negative connotation, but it doesn't necessarily have to be.
Right. Yeah, the Greeks didn't think it was a negative thing. Like they had
so
demons.
Vallee in Passport to Magonia is kind of he outlays some interesting arguments. One of the better takeaways from the book is, he goes into like fairy encounters and little people and fae folk, and he draws a lot of correlations between what people would report with these entities and then what people began reporting with like abductions or close encounters of the third kind, where you're physically in the presence of what you believe is an extraterrestrial. And we have a romanticized kind of silly fun concept of fairies today, but in the Middle Ages or in the more olden times, like, you didn't want to fuck with these things. You didn't want to see them in the woods. They were bad news, right?
Oh yeah, I mean, anyone who's listened to our Missing 411 episode knows that fairies aren't something you want to have catch you out in the woods.
Yeah,
right,
they're not
exactly.
necessarily
So,
Tinkerbell.
No, so
Right.
yeah, so if they're Missing 411, goes into that, are fairies disappearing these people. So fairies and fae folk and elves and all these, they would steal people away. And, we only have reports from the people who came back, but many people might not have. And so in a similar way, we have alien abductions, and we only know about those people who came back to tell about it. It could easily be the same thing with a different face for the modern era.
Oh yeah, definitely. I know that Jaques Vallee went into reasons that he didn't think it was an extraterrestrial phenomenon, and I think he gave 5 major reasons. He put out a paper about 5 major reasons, and one of the most interesting ones that I thought was, if this were an extraterrestrial phenomenon and it was aliens actually visiting us, one of the reasons they would visit us is to, say, take soil samples, document the local flora and fauna, map out the terrain, stuff like that. The number of visitations doesn't match the number of visitations that would be needed to do something like that. For example, we've been to Mars. I don't know how many times, but not that many times. We've sent, probes and stuff. And we know a good bit about Mars. We have ideas of what the soil's made of. We've mapped out the entire planet. And that's just with probes.
Yeah, and I think probably less than a dozen,
landings
on Mars.
Yeah, and same with the moon. Like, we know what moon rocks are made of. We have a good idea of how the soil's composed. And we've only been to the moon, like a dozen times or so. So... come on, we can only believe in one thing at a time.
There.
Yeah, one thing
Let's not do this. One thing at a time, guys. One thing at a time.
So to say that aliens have to visit thousands of times, because there's roughly estimated between 2,000 to 10,000 extraterrestrial abduction encounters. So to say that they need to abduct that many people just to kind of figure out what's going on because they're from another planet doesn't make a lot of sense. It doesn't make any sense for them to abduct that many people in order to gather whatever data they need. So it kind of points to something other than an extraterrestrial origin being the cause behind a lot of this phenomenon.
Right. Well, and his theory there is like, is this theater?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Right. Like, is this a show? I remember like 1 or 2 specific cases that he cites in the book, Passport to Magonia, where, this is like the mid 50s. So space and, the United States and the Soviet Union, the space race is like just starting, but it's everywhere. So people are very familiar with the idea of a small metal capsule and a man wearing a silver suit and a glass helmet, inside. And guess what? That's what people are seeing.
Right.
They're encountering in their fields a small capsule and a guy in a silvery suit, and he's like picking flowers, right? And it's, today we would find that absurd because we think that's not how you'd go about that, even with a moderately more advanced technology than ours. We'd be using like a drone, or you do it. You wouldn't just have the guy get out and cut a fucking leaf,
Right.
Right. How many of these stories were there of these little people coming up to whoever encountered them, and they were looking for fertilizer, or they were looking for soil stuff or whatever? Like the quote unquote aliens were carrying
something.
Yeah, they were carrying. Yeah, they were carrying like a small trough that had actual soil in it, or whatever.
Yeah, there were several stories where they were, and I might add that Vallee being French, a lot of his reports are from Europe, and so he does have American stuff in there, but it's kind of refreshing because it's a totally different continent and kind of a different society that's looking at it. So you got a lot of these like rural French farmers are being approached by small little men wearing and sometimes they're not silver suits, they're like bright blue or it's just weird, right? And they're like, hey, buddy, can I get some bread?
Right.
Yeah,
right.
yeah, literally, yeah.
And that just doesn't make any fucking sense, except then you go and you compare it to tales of, fairy folk. And all of a sudden, it's like, wait, they were wearing bright red or bright blue, and they wanted some food, or they wanted to give you something.
Those little guys love food. Like most of, I wouldn't say most, but there's a whole lot of fairy culture in Europe that's based around leaving food out for fairies so they don't hurt you.
Right.
In Ireland, like that's what they do. They leave out little, cans of beer for the fairies and little bread and treats and pastries and such, because that's what you do for the fairies. They just love treats. So yeah, definitely it has a similar parallel to a lot of the fairy stuff.
Yeah. So it just it really makes you think, as the saying goes.
That really activates my almonds.
Sends the noggin a jogging.
Yeah, I mean, you just combine with all the other things we've touched on here. Like, are these really people flying from Zeta Reticuli in hyper advanced craft, burning Illyrium-115? And landing, and so they can stick their fist up a cow's butt.
Right, exactly.
Is that really a reasonable motivation?
Maybe they just really like cows. I don't know.
Right.
Yeah. No, I totally get that.
Well, what do you actually get back to the cow thing? What do you think, Salty? What do you think about the cow mutilation thing?
Sorry, I dropped out there after you asked me what I think.
Oh, what do you think about the cat? I was like, oh, he doesn't think anything about it. No, what do you think about the cattle mutilation part of like the alien encounter thing?
I think that there's that goes off into a whole another conspiracy. I mean, the cattle mutilations often were reported that the government was in the area. They were often, this was the late 70s, early 80s, and kind of that black helicopter meme. I mean, and I haven't looked into this in a long time, but it all happened in a rather specific, most of them happened in like Utah, New Mexico, Arizona, like out in the fucking area where the United States federal government owns like 90% of those states, and can do whatever they want out there. And, genetic science it's reasonable to assume that genetic science is being conducted by the government on a level that we're not even aware of or privy to. And I've always kind of thought that it makes more sense to me that it was the United States government that needed this biological material for research. But, I have no proof of that. It just seems to jive more with my personal feeling on this subject.
That kind of makes sense. I mean, a lot of them happened near Dulce, too, according to history.
But the Dulce, Dulce is a whole other thing. I don't believe it at all. But
you don't believe any? Well, no, I don't necessarily believe that. And here's another thing, ladies and gentlemen, goys and shixes. We at the Paranormies don't necessarily believe everything we talk about on the show, but we talk about a lot of stuff.
I believe 100% of it, even though it contradicts itself.
Yeah, right. Yeah, listen. No, yeah. I mean, you don't think that...
I believe whatever this show topic is.
Well, I mean, I'm going to say, you don't think that, like, Henrik's been doing Red Ice for what, like 12 years now? Do you think he believes every single thing that comes on his show? No, he's the host of the show. He's got to, sometimes you have a guest who's, like, completely out of left field, but he's your guest. You're not going to, like, BTFO your guest and have him never come on the show again. Yeah.
Yeah, that's why I say, like, I believe whatever the show topic is for that week,
Right, exactly. Yeah, I don't necessarily believe the 49 levels of things that go down into the center of the earth, and that's where the alien bases are and whatever. No, but like, do I believe that there might be a military installation there? More than likely there is. Is there aliens? Probably not.
When things like Google Earth became readily available, I spent a lot of time looking at the architectural or whatever mesa. I mean, I combed over that. And of course, they are editing it so you can't see anything. But you look at this thing and I just don't see it. It's kind of like Bob Lazar. Bob Bob Lazar mentioned a place called S4 or Site 4, which was separate from the Groom Lake facility. And he described exactly where it was and where they brought the hangar, where the retracting hangars are and where they test these things. And yeah, I went and I looked and I looked and I looked and I looked, and there's nothing out there. There's not even like a fucking game trail, And of course, yeah, this could all be doctored. It could all be hidden, or they could be really, really good at camouflage. But then
but you're also talking about Google. So
sure. But the thing is like, for a while, you couldn't look at like Dick Cheney's private residence. That was blurred out. Mm-hmm. Like if they don't want you to look at something, they will stop you from looking at it. Of course, yeah, they could be doing it more subtly. But what I think
that's how they started doing it. Was like, oh, you just can't see it. But enough people, I'm pretty sure that enough people bitched about it that they're like, okay, fine, we'll just, make it look like normal terrain.
Well, I mean, you can look at Area 51. You can see the hangars and whatever they want to show you that's above ground. It exists. Mm-hmm. And you can look at any military facility that is like, I don't know, you can't look at like submarine pens, but say there are bases out in the sticks. You can look at them, and what I'm saying is you can get a feel for like what a heavily used area looks like. There's trails, there's little communications posts, and there's things out there. And then you go and you look at these places where there's supposedly an alien base. There's just absolutely nothing. So I mean, maybe they're really good at hiding it, but.
You know what? I mean, I wouldn't put at this point. I mean, based on what we've seen with Vault 7 and other things we've seen that have been leaked out of our government, whatever, with like the spirit cooking ties and all these other things, I wouldn't put half of anything past these people anymore. Whether it's the CIA or our government, doesn't even have to be our government. It could be the quote unquote deep state that we don't even really know anything about. Maybe it's not our government.
Yeah. No, I mean, it could be. There's a whole other topic called like the breakaway civilization, which is promoted by a guy named Richard Dolan.
I love Richard Dolan stuff in the breakaway civilization. Yeah, we should do that like on a separate episode. That's a really good topic.
I know that almost requires its own episode, but
it really does.
I mean, we're kind of going off the track here, but I mean, I guess it's just okay. So getting back on topic, one thing that really stands out in Passport to Magonia, and gives more evidence to this whole evolution of the phenomenon over time, is it's not really widely known, but in like the late 1800s, I don't know if it was the 1870s or 1880s, there was like a series of airship sightings over the Midwest, like Ohio and Kentucky, and we're talking about like a steampunk Zeppelin, right? Like a giant airship that flew, and people reported it had like arc lights and like belching smoke from its stacks, and then it would land and it would ask for like water or some other, like we were just saying, some other thing that's totally innocuous, like, hello sir, I need water for my steam boilers for my airship, and this is documented. You can find the old newspapers and stuff, and this happened like multiple times over the course of several years. And again, this is like just out of the technological range of the people at that time to construct, but within their ability to easily comprehend.
Right. Yeah. No, I've read about those before. They would supposedly crash, and they'd be like, I need this or that, and they would take off again and fly off into the sunset. Mm-hmm. It really does lend credence to the idea, like you said, it's theater. It's not something real. It's some sort of theatrical thing. But of course, that leads to the question of why would this happen in the first place? If there's something out there doing this theatrical act of pretending to be humans from the future, or pretending to be an advanced alien species, or what have you, what's the reason behind it? Like, what are they getting out of this? And that's the thing that I think is most interesting about this whole phenomenon.
The motivation is really harder to understand than anything else. One thing that I tend to enjoy more than some of the other explanations is, you mentioned leaving out food for little people, because if you didn't, they would fuck with your shit, right? Because they enjoy messing with us.
Oh, they're very mischievous.
It's the trickster mentality. So in some respect, maybe they just like fucking. If it's not hard for them to, magically, create this object and fly around in it, and they just be like, "Did you see that guy's face?" You know,
right? Yeah, it could be. I mean, but then, you know, where do they come from? Are they from another planet, another dimension? You know, the future? Who knows? That's the most interesting part of this, is like their intentions and their origins. And
Right.
I think a lot of times with UFO phenomena, especially, it's really easy to get caught up in the weeds, and it's easy to get, you know, bogged down in all the details of, oh, well, this is what the shape of this craft looked like, and like people documenting like the shapes of the craft or the colors or whatever. I almost think it doesn't really matter, especially if you consider that a lot of these things probably aren't craft in the sense of being made out of physical material. It doesn't really matter what the shape of the craft is. It doesn't really matter where they say they're from, because it's all a line of bullshit. It's all something that, whatever these things are, they've made up to trick people for reasons unknown.
Right, but they've been doing it
Yeah.
throughout history, though, throughout recorded history.
Right, but
Right.
their manifestations and the things that they say change, you know, over time to whatever would make sense to the person they're
Right, to the
investigating. I mean,
to the time period that it's happening in.
yeah, I mean, like if they flew down today in like classic like Bible, what's it, like Ezekiel, the wheels within wheels thing. You know what I'm talking about? Like if they flew down today and like claimed to be an angel, you know, unless you happen to get, you know, somebody who's actually religious, like 9 out of 10 people now would be like, that's fucking bullshit, man. You know, fuck off.
Well,
Yeah,
9 out
I
of
know
10
you're an
people would be
alien.
paying attention to their phone and not really paying attention to
Like,
they'd be
selfie
spinning their fidget spinner and taking selfies. You know, yeah.
Right.
Be like, is this an ARG for a game or something?
Right.
Yeah.
Hold up, fam. Hold up. Oh man. Yeah, but I think that the craft thing has kind of like been a constant, you know what I mean, throughout all of these. It's always it's been some sort of, you know, thing in the sky. That's kind of a constant through all of these instances.
Well, that's what I think is so interesting about the Wonders in the Sky book, is they kind of explain in the beginning, like, you know, there's phenomena and a lot of the details change. So what we're trying to do here is look at the details that remain the same throughout history. And if you get down to the physical descriptions and you leave out the value judgments that are attached to it, or whatever you want to call, like, you know, oh, I think it was an alien. Well, if you leave out the, well, I think it was an alien, and you just say, I saw a light in the sky, it did this and that, and then it disappeared.
Right.
When you do that, that's when you start to notice patterns, and that's when you start to notice that these things kind of tend to do the same shit over and over. They'll show up from anywhere, you know, between like 30 seconds to a couple hours. Some of the sightings were a couple days. They'll fly around. They'll take on different appearances, like the shields, or so there were some that a face would appear in the sky. And then after a while, they'll disappear. So if you just go by the physical descriptions, an encounter from, say, 1750 is pretty remarkably similar to an encounter from 300 BC. So I think there are things that don't change, even though a lot of things do change about them.
The superficial things change, and we, in the modern era, we read a lot into it. Like, okay, so they were flying, therefore the craft had to be made out of metal and have a propulsion source. They didn't say that, we did.
Yeah, exactly, and that's exactly what I mean when I say value judgment. It's something that we're putting onto it that, you know, we don't know that for sure. I mean, if you go by a just the facts sort of worldview with this, there's certain things that you can say they do, and there's certain things that you can't say they do.
Right. We're applying our own like confirmation bias to it, basically.
Right. And to say, oh, it came from another world. Well, you know, how do you don't know that. You're just saying
Right.
that.
Yeah, they could have come from the hole in the North Pole, you know?
South Pole.
Right,
South Pole.
exactly.
There's holes in the South Pole, Salty. Holes in the South Pole.
Well, it could be both. The Earth is a donut.
Way up north.
Oh, well, yeah. Well, that's right. Where Admiral Byrd did fly into the North Pole. But I think that might have been misinformation just to keep us away from the South Pole, to be honest. I want to do the whole Hollow Earth Admiral Byrd thing one of these days. That's really interesting. No, I mean that's super interesting actually.
Well, haven't you done Operation High Jump?
We covered it a little bit, but we were doing something else for that episode. I can't remember which one that was.
Operation an Antarctica episode.
We did do an Antarctica episode with Horus the Avenger. That was the Antarctica, Atlantis, and Aliens, the A-word episode. We did talk a little bit about Operation High Jump there. But yeah, we can get back. I mean, like, if you think about it, actually, speaking of Antarctica, the British minister of... Did you see those tweets that Horace sent us, Scott?
Oh, yeah. Something about, like, they were worried about terrorist acts in Antarctica.
Yeah, well, like, the British Ministry of, like, Anti-Terrorism or whatever, like, put a warning out for terrorist attacks in Antarctica, which is kind of weird.
Yeah, that is interesting.
Really to be non-tangentially connected to this episode. But, yeah, I just... But yeah, no, we did do a tiny bit of Operation High Jump with the Horus episode. But yeah, we could do a ton of Antarctica stuff and Hollow Earth and all that at a later date.
That's a topic for another show.
It's a topic. Yeah, that's a topic for that's for another episode. But Salty is now revealing himself to be another trove of knowledge that we could have on a regular basis if he wants to come back. So. That way you don't have to scream at your laptop.
Well,
yeah, no, I know that. I know that feel. I know that feel. It's exactly. When you're listening to a show and you're like, "No, that's not what it is." God damn it!
Every time that like I get busy and I can't do one, and then I come back and listen to it later, I'm like, I really wish I could have done that. Like I know more about this than you, John. Like, what are you saying?
It doesn't take much.
Hey,
of course.
Hey, you guys.
Well, I guess he's not coming back.
Yep. Well, so much for that. All right, yeah. So this will be the last time we have the Fatherland Zone. So no, I'm just kidding. Do you guys want to take a little break and then we'll get back into some more stuff in the second hour?
Are we there already?
We're at like 56, 57 minutes. I mean, we can go for a few more minutes.
Flew by.
Right?
Yeah, that'd be good.
Cool. We got a song sent to us by one of the Identity Europa, another member of Identity Europa, Oktoberfaust from Nebraska. He is a member of the band called Autopsick, and he sent me this song called "Await Your Demise." It's pretty heavy.
Autistic?
So, Autopsic, not autistic. Actually, it makes me laugh because that was the first thing I thought. I was like, why don't you guys just call yourselves Autis-sick?
I thought that was the joke.
No, it's like autopsy, but instead of C, it's sick. So Autopsick. It's called "Await Your Demise."
No one steal that autistic name. I'm going to use that for my band.
That's right. That's right. When Scott puts his band together. All right, we will listen to this. It's very heavy. Don't hurt your ears. We'll see you in a few minutes. right, everybody, we're back. This is still the Paranormies Present, the Ahnenerbe Hour. I'm still Johnny Monoxide alongside Scott Taylor and Saul TC Mann from the Fatherland. We're talking about aliens, alien sightings, crafts, passport to Magonia, Jaques Vallee, and all kinds of stuff. Where do you want to go now, dude?
Well, I want to talk about a couple things that happened to me personally that pushed me away from the idea that these are people from another planet in spacecraft. I grew up in a house. It was a really big house, and it had a downstairs that was very big. A lot of bedrooms down there. It was like what they call a daylight basement, though. So it was like half underground. And for some reason, my parents never used that part of the house. I mean, it was just totally unutilized for pretty much the entire time that I lived in this house. When I became a teenager, I moved down there. I had never liked being down there. When we moved into that house, I was young. I thought it was scary down there. But, of course, all kids think it's scary kind of in the basement. But I just never liked being down there. There was a long hallway, and, like, on the way up the stairs, you always felt like something was looking at you. There was a big room down there, like a rec room with a bar, and it always felt like when your back was turned, like somebody was behind the bar looking at you. I always had this really creepy feeling, but when I was a teenager, I said, you know what, fuck it. I want to have this whole part of the house to myself. I can bring my friends down here. I can party. I can do whatever I want. It was worth it. So I moved down there, and I just put all that shit, out of my head as being silly, maybe just because it felt weird because it was halfway underground. So one night I was in the back corner bedroom, and the door had a hook lock on it, like the loop and the hook, and because it didn't latch into the doorknob, didn't latch in the frame. I was sitting there reading a book, and it was like almost midnight. And I was sitting there, and the hook just lifted up, and the door swung open in like one fluid motion. And I was sitting on my bed, like with this book, and I'm like, that was pretty scary, right? I'm like, whoa, okay. So I have to like go through that door to get out of here. and,
so you got to back through scary hallway.
Yeah, I have to go into the scary hallway, like run up scary stairs, like the ghost, whatever was just did that. I have to go through him, so like that happened. And that freaked me out. I didn't go back down there for a long time. And then it was like, that happened when I was in high school. And then it was like many years later, or like maybe 3 or 4 years later, I wasn't living at that house anymore, but my girlfriend, who later became my wife, sometimes we would stay there for a couple days. And we were downstairs, and we were in a different bedroom. There's 2 bedrooms. They were kind of across from each other with a small little hallway that ran parallel to the long hallway. And I was having a conversation with her, and the door behind me was open, and you could kind of see through to the other hallway, both hallways. And she's talking to me, and we're talking to each other, and all of a sudden, like, she looked terrified. She's in like mid-sentence, she stopped. And the hair on my neck and my arms stood up. I don't know if it's because of her face or what, but I said, you just saw something, didn't you? And she goes, yeah. I just saw like a gray man, like a man made out of gray, just walked through the hallway, And I'm like, I didn't doubt her for a second. And like as soon as I saw her face, I absolutely knew that she had seen whatever it was that inhabited this downstairs of this house.
Oh, that's so creepy.
I know, and I envy her because she saw it.
Now, when you say a gray man, do you mean a gray in the sense of like the alien kind of gray, or was it like a human being that looks gray?
I don't mean the sense of the alien. Not like an alien. The best description I've gotten from her is just like a man, but just like a ghost, right? Like a guy made out of gray,
okay.
Like translucent gray, foggy man.
Huh. Okay.
So, that happened, and I didn't get to see it. And it's kind of one of those things like people live their entire lives without ever laying eyes on something like that. And my wife happened to see this thing in a house that I lived in over 10 years. But you know, like I just knew. I was like, oh yeah, that's totally legit. Like I completely understand that you just saw this thing because I know it exists. I felt it. So then around the same time, it was in the same time period where we weren't living there, but we were staying there. We were in bed one night, and the bed was up against the wall. I was on the side that was facing, the edge was towards the room. And I woke up in the middle of the night, and I looked over, you know, as I'm kind of like getting my bearings, I look over, and there were two small gray things with big black eyes standing next to my bed.
Oh, jeez. So,
like,
what happened when you saw them? Did they notice you?
Well, yeah, they were looking at me. I mean, they were like,
right, but like, did they
straight
notice you were awake and all that?
You know, as soon as I became fully aware of what I was seeing, it scared me, like, more than anything has ever scared me in my life. And I tried to scream, and, you know, it came out as like a little gurgle, and I tried to move, and I couldn't move. And I don't really remember anything after that. You know, I just either I just closed my eyes, or, you know, what? I have no memory past like 4 or 5 seconds of like staring at this thing.
Oh, wow.
That is super.
But see,
fucking creepy, dude.
Yes, creepy.
Yeah.
Oh, dude, it's terrifying. And like,
no, I literally, I had that thing that happened while you were talking. I had that thing happen where like my whole back like froze up.
Yeah, I got goosebumps on my arms.
Yeah, it's not something that you want to see. You never.
Yeah, no, you don't. Nobody ever wants to see that.
No, I mean, and even people who, like, you know, are really UFOs, like, you don't want to wake up and see that and then like not be able to move. But, you know, the thing is, like, I do not get night terrors. I have never had night terrors. It's not something that happens to me, and this has never happened before, and it's never happened since. Okay, this encounter with these beings only happened in the same exact rooms in which I also had paranormal, like, ghost encounters.
So you think the two are related then, in some way?
This for me changed my entire perception of this phenomenon, because up until this point, they were separate things. I was really into the extraterrestrial hypothesis when I was younger, and I read all this stuff about this, but the fact that these two phenomenon happened to me in the exact same physical place, and I haven't had any other experiences like this. I'm not saying I was abducted, but if, you know, people who say that they are, they tend to claim a repetition of these experiences, right?
Yeah, lifelong abductees is a really common thing.
Yeah, and I've never had this experience since. I don't feel like I'm special, or like I'm marked, or like they're after me. I totally don't expect to ever see this again, and I can't say why I feel that, other than the fact that I'm not in that house.
Do you think that if you were in that house, do you think that it's a possibility that you would see something like this again?
Absolutely. I mean, I believe that house is haunted, or whatever. It has something going on in the downstairs that, you know, allows paranormal phenomenon to occur. And
yeah, there's something about that whole phenomenon of paranormal or high strangeness, or whatever you want to call it, where these things tend to cluster even when they're not readily apparent how they're related. Another example that I can think of is when there are Bigfoot sightings, oftentimes in the same locations around the same time, there will be UFO sightings as well. Now, I don't know if the Bigfoots are necessarily the pilots of these craft or something. Another example is the Loch Ness Monster has a lot of UFO sightings around the Loch Ness. So something about this phenomena or these phenomenon, it's almost as if they're related somehow, but I don't know how. I mean, it's really strange to me how these things can pop up simultaneously.
Yeah, and so the fact that these two things happened to me in the same place forever changed my view on the extraterrestrial hypothesis. And it's just personal anecdotes. I can't prove this, and it's just my feeling based on my experiences. One thing I found was really interesting, though, was I was listening to a paranormal podcast called "Where Did the Road Go," which is pretty cool, and they tend to.
Oh yeah, I like them.
They tend to take a more nuanced approach to this stuff, and they had a guest on there who was a woman who claimed to have had like multiple near-death experiences, and she was describing one of these experiences, and she said in this experience, kind of like she didn't go to the light, and she felt like there were these negative beings, and that they were essentially the little gray aliens, that she encountered these things in her near-death experience. And I thought that was amazing. Whether or not this woman can be believed or not, it just really made me think that.
Well, she had multiple experiences. Why would she lie?
Right. I mean, yeah.
Hey, you said they take a more nuanced approach. They take a more nuanced approach.
Right. But
so, like, meaning
they do,
what,
but they don't.
They don't want to gas the kikes?
No, they're not. Well, they're not political at all. I mean,
I'm joking. Nobody wants to gas the kikes.
Well, one man had a dream.
Oh. Then they shot him in the head. Oh, we're talking about different people. Never mind.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, I interrupted. Go ahead.
Well, I don't know. I just felt like that was a really interesting, I guess I personally believe that it's quite possible that these gray alien things are somehow on the same plane as spirits or demons. They may be demons. That's where I tend to go with it.
Well, I don't necessarily disagree with. I don't necessarily disagree with that. I mean, the interdimensional being thing is kind of where I tend to lean when it comes to aliens. And like you said earlier, what's the difference between an alien and a demon at that point? Right. Interdimensional beings, aliens, angels, demons, they've been seen all throughout history, prehistory, throughout the Bible, throughout all religious texts, throughout all ancient texts, through carvings down through... I mean, even if you go back to Angkor Wat, which is 80,000 years old, there's these same carvings and things of, you know what I mean? So people have been seeing these things for millennia.
Yeah, just hope you don't see them. It's not pleasant.
Yeah.
The near-death experience thing is really interesting to me because I can almost understand someone who is like, the aliens are only showing up where ghosts are because they're both like some sort of, electromagnetic thing or whatever. But like, how are they following your spirit or your soul as it leaves your body? Like clearly, like there's nothing in this universe that evolved on a planet somewhere that has flying craft made out of metal and ceramic and whatever. They can also follow your soul as it leaves its body. Like, it's just, I'm sorry, that technology cannot exist. It's not possible. So that, I think that's probably one of the most convincing arguments for it being something other than physical, for it being something that comes out of another dimension or something above our dimension, or however you want to phrase it.
Yeah, and, it's not, that aspect of it is not something that I heavily researched. It's just this one report, this one woman who, as Johnny pointed out, she might be an attention-seeking, full of shit. But it really struck me as very interesting given the context of my own experiences. Yeah,
definitely. Are those the only experiences you've had, or have you had other ones?
No, that was it. I mean, like I said, it all revolved around this house, these particular rooms, and a person can go their entire lives without ever encountering anything. I keep my eyes peeled all the time when I'm out at sea, but I've seen some space junk burning up on reentry a couple times, which is quite a show, but nothing supernatural.
Right. It does seem like a lot of this phenomena is really location based. There's hotspots for ghosts and aliens and all sorts of things. Like the Southwest, especially, I know there's alien tours, I think you could call them, where I think there's one in South Colorado somewhere where it's like UFO sighting tours, and they take you out there and you just kind of hang out, and sometimes you'll see UFOs just flying overhead.
Yeah, that tends to be rather easily explained to me because, as I said earlier, the federal government owns like 90% of the Southwest, and they do a lot of shit out there, and
They
just
do.
conventional aircraft, missiles, or things that they have going on in the sky, maybe some next gen shit. It's going to look pretty wild if you don't expect it or don't know what you're looking at. I mean, there's been a couple instances of like ICBM tests off the coast, and I remember there was one within the last several years where like a submarine between San Diego and Hawaii launched like a Minuteman or whatever, Trident, and it went. They were doing a full scale test of this thing without a warhead. It went up into space, and everyone in like San Diego and Los Angeles saw this thing, and it looked like fucking crazy, like blue streak that stayed in the atmosphere for like 30 minutes. Right? You can look this up. It was a big deal, and well, it turns out it's just a missile. It's just some normal shit.
Right.
There's the Norway spiral, which happened a couple of years ago too.
The Norway spiral. That was a big thing a couple of years ago. I used to listen to this guy, Freeman. You ever heard of him? Freeman Fly, the Freeman Perspective.
No, not familiar with that.
He's a big conspiratorial kind of guy. He got really big into the whole Barack Obama is a clone of Pharaoh Akhenaten.
Huh.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, that's deep.
So he was kings, is what you're saying.
Well, Akhenaten. Well, that's the thing with the ancient alien thing is how they keep pushing that Akhenaten was an alien. Came from that's their one of their big memes is that Akhenaten came from somewhere else.
It's funny that you mentioned Akhenaten because he had an experience with an alien as well, supposedly. That's in his book that I read. Let me see if I can find that really quick. I'll get back to you in a minute on that. But he was the one who came up with the religion of the sun disk worship. Mm-hmm. And that supposedly all started when he had an encounter with a creature or a UFO or whatever. Mm-hmm. And it basically told him to move the capital of Egypt, and it told him to set up this new cult of the sun worship, because Egypt was polytheistic before that. They had their Ra and Set and all these various deities.
And Kek?
Yeah, and Kek.
Kek. And Kek. And you guys remember Kek?
Yeah. They went from that to monotheistic worship. And it was a huge thing in Egyptian history, if I remember correctly. And let me see if I can find that. There's more stuff about it. I'll have to look.
Okay, well, what I was saying was that Freeman was one of the first people that I listened to, and I heard about the Norway spiral. That was the blue spiral, right? It was.
Yeah, it was blue, but so was this missile exhaust.
Right, exactly. Yeah, the same thing that happened over San Diego. Yeah,
and that was the official explanation for the Norway spiral, was that it was a missile.
Right, sure, of course it was. Because the media the media and the government would never lie to us about anything like that.
No, certainly. I mean, you can take that aspect of it, but and I was not inclined to believe. But then the San Diego or Los Angeles thing happened, and I thought, that looks so similar. It wasn't a spiral, but it's blue. It was wispy. It was way up there in the sky, and I.
Right, but the thing about the Norway spiral, it really was like a mathematical spiral. It was almost like a Fibonacci.
Out the slide rule.
Well, it was almost like a Fibonacci thing. It really was.
Yeah, but so is the shell of a conch. Is that Is that a conspiracy?
They're aliens.
No,
Aliens.
no, but like, well, no, actually, and it's not a conch. It's the Nautilus, by the way. That's the Fibonacci. The conch is the you blow into it and you can make the fucking sound that summons.
I'm not up to speed on my mollusks.
Well,
hey, listen.
So you know if you're mollusk.
We cover all kinds of stuff here, sir. Okay, sir. No, but that was the thing is it literally was almost a perfect Fibonacci spiral. That was the thing about the Norway spiral. That's did separate it from the thing in San Diego. Which I mean, like I said,
right.
It could have been.
It wasn't the same, but there were similarities.
Right, where the similarities, like, you know, depending on how hard you lean towards aliens or how hard you lean towards it not being aliens, you know, you can see, you know, your own perspective, your like your own confirmation bias can make you see things differently, or you know, than whatever the official narrative or whatever is. You know, that's got a lot to do with it. I think the human brain itself has a lot to do with, you know, what we see, what we don't see, what we think we see. You know.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah. So study your mollusks, nigga.
It might not even be a mollusk. It might be a cephalopod. I don't know.
Actually, you know what?
We'll
I actually think that a nautilus is a cephalopod. Actually, now that I think about it, it's a hard-shelled cephalopod. I don't know. You ever seen a live? Have you ever seen a live nautilus it's got like 850 legs and stuff? It's really weird looking.
No.
Yeah, they're super creepy looking. It's almost like the flying spaghetti monster in a shell.
The Paranormies
it's like the flying
case. I'm sorry, I interrupted.
I'm saying I'll call the Paranormies. Oh wait, we're already on. Shit. Adam, where are you? No. This is what happens when Adam has to work.
Right.
We start talking about the flying spaghetti monster. Yeah. So. Shoot, I just totally derailed the entire second half.
Well, I found the Akhenaten thing if you want to do that.
Yeah, do that real quick. Yeah. Redeem us, please.
Okay, so basically he was walking along the river one day. He looked up and he saw a shining disc descend from the sky. And he heard a voice tell him that he was supposed to build a new capital for Egypt and give it the name Akhetaten, or the horizon of the solar disk. Now, during Akhenaten's reign, that became the capital, and their symbol for the word horizon is a disc floating over a mountain range. So maybe it means nothing, but I think it's interesting that that's the word for horizon, is they have a little UFO type thing. And that was in 1347 BC. So to say that this stuff started after World War II, definitely not correct.
That's ludicrous.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, well, you know, and what that reminds me of, though, is say, like, the Bible. How many times in the Bible was somebody just not even, they're just minding their own business, right? And then all of a sudden, there's like a bright light, and something goes, "Fear not, for I am the angel."
Yeah, it's interesting how that's always the first thing that's said is "fear not." Like, these guys must be pretty...
You'd be pretty fucking scared, man.
Oh, yeah, exactly.
Giant light out of the sky. First thing I'm going to do is shit myself. Like, you know...
Or like a tree just catches on fire. You're like, oh, shit, there's a fire. Nope, hold up. It's God.
No, y'all chill. It's God. It's God. Yeah.
Off the top of my head, I can think Ezekiel saw the wheels within the wheels and the... four faces and all that. The Apostle Paul saw on the way to was Damascus or Tarsus, one of the two, I forget. He saw an angel of the Lord, and it was bright, and he fell to his knees. And the thing about that one, I mean, if you want to even say he got some sort of like radiation burn from it or something, because he had scales afterwards that form on his eyes, the Bible says.
Yeah.
And he couldn't see for several days, and they fell off, and he could see again. So
he had radiation poisoning from something that came out of the sky. Then there was it Isaiah was taken up into the sky in a almost a chariot of fire. The book, one of the books that didn't make it into the Bible because of Constantine was the the Book of Enoch, and the Book of Enoch, and Enoch was what was Noah's father, and he was taken into the sky in a chariot, and there's all that's the thing about the Book of Enoch. I don't know, Salty, if you've read any of that, but there's a lot of what would be considered alien theory in the Book of Enoch.
Does that have a lot of that stuff about the Nephilim and the interbreeding?
Nephilim, it does, yeah.
Right, which can also lend to that. I mean, a lot of people really get into that shit.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, who is it, Bella, that knows about all that stuff?
Bella, really our friend Bella Dashwood, she's been on 2 different episodes. We've had her on for the Nephilim Part 1, Part 2. But yeah, the Book of Enoch, the fragments of the Book of the Giants, these other...
So she really likes stories about giant supermen breeding with young Aryan women?
Are you? I mean, dude, you're married. Stop it.
What's that matter?
That's right. We're gonna have. I'm not saying it, but this certain meme that where there's harems. But anyways, not allowed to say it anymore. But anyways, yeah.
Well, didn't Enoch also not die? Was that Enoch who...
Enoch was taken into the clouds.
Didn't taste death.
Yeah, he never tasted death. He was taken into the clouds. And, yeah. So the Book of Enoch is where a lot of the ancient alien theory comes from. And that's is it an apocryphal book, or is it one of those?
Yeah, that's considered apocrypha.
Yeah, it's an apocrypha. Yeah, it's books
that aren't canon.
They're not canon. Well, that's just because Constantine didn't want it to be. So, like, they literally had a pile of 235 books. They're like, we're going to pick these 26.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's how it worked.
It really did. It's really how it worked. I mean, that's literally how the Bible was put together.
Yeah, but I don't want to get into dissecting the origins of Christian theology.
Well, we got another 45 minutes, so why not?
Well, I know. Well, I got something. I was reminded of by Scott here, because he was talking about Barack Obama conspiracy theories, and when I was standing in line for the Trump rally that happened in Western Washington back in August of last year, and there was all kinds of people and all kinds of talk going on, and it was a lot of fun. But one thing that a couple different people would kept getting back to is this: Obama's not going to leave office; he's going to declare martial law. And I was reading that shit back in like 1999 about Bill Clinton, and I wouldn't be surprised if people were saying that shit in 1992 about the first George Bush. And this kind of gets into my thing about like rational skepticism. It's like I was just like, how are people still repeating this same shit? They think that every fucking president is just gonna like up and declare martial law, and like the United Nations are going to come in and put their fucking New World Order troops on the street. This is stuff people were saying in line at the Trump rally, And I remember them saying it about George Bush too, George W. Bush. Like they thought, like liberals thought that he would do the same thing. It's something about it. I don't know if it just appeals to the idea of like the 3%er mentality, where they want to go out and like shoot a bunch of liberals and save the day. I don't know. I know Musonius from Rebel Yell calls it collapsitarianism, which I really like the phrase. That's a great term.
This idea of these libertarians who think that the power is going to go out and they're going to go out and shoot a bunch of bad guys and come back and like they saved America. And it's just not how reality works. That's never, I don't think that's ever going to happen that way. And like you were saying, like the people who say this stuff, I think they lack discernment, and I think they lack the ability to understand what's probable and what's not. And they don't have that skeptical attitude that I think is needed for a lot of conspiracies and paranormal stuff. Like you can be skeptical without being a debunker, which I know you'd mentioned before we started, the idea of the skeptic versus the debunker. So, I mean, if you want to talk about that a little bit, we can talk about that.
Yeah, sure. So, I mean, if you interested in this thing, whatever. It's a pretty big thing. It covers a lot of stuff from aliens to Sasquatch to ghosts and whatever else you might lump in there. You're going to encounter a lot of different shit, and some of it's interesting and some of it's just total crap. And I'm sure
like flat Earth
is familiar. Right, flat Earth, or like
crystal
the whole
crystal trees, anything that Renegade says.
Sure. Yeah, sure. That's some of it. That's just total garbage.
Grow some balls, Kyle. Grow some balls.
Hollow Earth to me is just ridiculous. It's not, it's just like, get out of here. So anyone who's into this stuff is probably familiar with like the show Coast to Coast AM, right? It was like the original, the most famous. It was great. Now Art Bell was a real Art Bell was a real artist at what he does. George Norrie, I don't know if he's still the host because it's been like a year or two.
Yeah, he's still the host.
Don't you can't include those two in the same sentence because that's like
George is kind of a hack, and the thing that really bothers. Well, I was being generous. The thing that really bothers me about Coast to Coast now is that if you listen to that show, like it was maybe say last year, people were getting back into this Nibiru shit. Okay. That there's like a hidden 10th planet, right? That's like on its way through the solar system. And if you look at the sun at like the right time of day and you squint and you look to the left, you'll see it, right? And there's all these videos on YouTube of like the second sun, and people are freaked out. And so George Norrie was getting these people on there that were selling books. That's the thing. They're selling books, and they're telling people, oh, you got like 8 months left, and then the tidal waves are going to start. And you got to buy my book, and then you got to go buy survival food from this company. And it's just fear-mongering. It's just pure and simple profit-driven fear-mongering. Unfortunately, there's a lot of really not that bright people. He said very generously, Scott, that they lack discernment. And that they're interested in this stuff, and they get caught up by these fucking charlatans. And so, the planet Nibiru, if you look at Nibiru theory, it's supposed to have come like 8 times or more by now in the last 20 years. That sort of thing really bothers me. And there's so much of it in this, paranormal.
Uh-oh.
Hello?
Oop, we lost. You said last thing I heard was paranormal.
Yeah, I said paranormal world, then it was just silent, but I don't hear Scott. Well, what do you have to say, Johnny?
Well, I mean, I think people have gotten a little too carried away with some of the stuff. I mean, like we were talking about earlier, we have the Ancient Aliens show, we have that America Unearthed show that was coming on the History Channel. There's the whole zeitgeist movement from the internet. There's all these conspiratorial theories that don't always turn out to be true. People have gotten a little further away and have given credence to, like, they'll just believe just about anything,
Well, it's as though there's a market this stuff. So there's a large profit motive. Either profit or just attention, celebrity even to promote this stuff, and so people are out there, deceiving the weak-minded with these tales, and it's a real crappy thing to do, and it's very prevalent in this thing.
All right, I'm back. I'm sorry, my Discord shit the bed. One thing I was saying, and I'm like, why is no one responding to me? The planet Nibiru thing. Another one that was supposed to kill us all was the year 2012. And you said Nibiru, and that's immediately what I thought of, because that's when it was supposed to come and drown the earth in tidal waves and earthquakes and this and that.
Oh, yeah.
All because the Mayans forgot to, add an extra end of the year onto their calendar for that year. Like, it's ridiculous that the 2012 thing, I think, really typifies, like, the kind of mentality that comes with these chronic believers, I guess you could call them, people who just can't disbelieve anything. Like anything that comes across their desk, it's like, yep, that's the thing. That's true. I believe it. Even when it's contradictory. Like 2012 is supposed to kill us all and then somehow also lead us into a new dimension of vibration and enlightenment and this, that, and the other. So I don't know. I think Coast to Coast now and George Norrie really kind of make those things worse.
Oh, God. George Norrie is so bad.
It exists as a platform for to sell products to scare people.
Yeah, that's all he does anymore. They hawk shit. Like they got a doctor on who tells you to like eat lead to cure cancer.
Yeah.
Do you know who I'm talking about? There's a fucking doctor on there. I can't remember his name. It's something like he says that because lead is found in the body, that lead is like a nutritional thing we require.
It's like homeopathic.
Yeah.
Lead is homeopathic because, it's found on the scale of
stuff
elements.
At least doesn't hurt you. Because the homeopathic shit is just water, so at least that's not going to harm you.
Lead will actually
isn't homeopathic like you put a little bit of something into your water?
Yeah.
So if you're like drinking uranium, that's not.
Well, what they do is they dilute stuff, and the more they dilute it, the more powerful it is somehow. So I'm serious, dude. There's this like hippie organic store like a couple blocks from my house, and they sell the homeopathic stuff, and it'll say on there like 7200X, which means it's been diluted like 7,200 times. And somehow
that just makes it more powerful, dude.
Yeah, no, seriously.
The more it's been diluted, the better it is for you. That doesn't make any sense.
Right. That's why when I'm hungry, I take a Big Mac and I just throw it in a gallon of water and take a sip, and I'm stuffed.
Right? No, what you do is you bring the bag home and you throw it straight in the toilet and flush it.
And you just sniff it. Yeah.
Yeah. Whatever you do, don't eat 3 Grand Macs and 2 big chickens.
Don't actually can confirm. Don't do that. Holy shit. Dude, I think we were the only 2 people to actually pull that off.
Good.
Good. We saved the entire white race by doing that. Maybe I'm not sure.
Our sacrifice.
Donald's, if you're listening, please bring back the Grand Mac. I missed.
Yeah, actually, bring back the Grand Mac. That literally could feed like a family
Grand Mac is
of
the
5.
size that's the size that Big Mac should have been the whole
Absolutely.
time.
I
feel like
you can't call it a Big Mac.
Okay. Yeah, it's a Mac.
Go ahead.
At the most.
No, go ahead, Scott. No.
If we want to talk about conspiracies, I really think that the Grand Mac is how big the Big Mac used to be, like back in the 90s, and I think they changed the size.
Maybe you were just smaller.
No, you were probably smaller. This is what they always were.
I was smaller because that's how big the Big Mac felt to me when I was
should have been is what you're trying to say.
But definitely should have been. No, I thought it was. That's my conspiracy, my personal unprovable. Well, you believe what you believe, and I'll believe what I believe.
Yeah, we'll talk about the moon later, okay? So
I bet George Norrie will get to the bottom of this. I'll call him and ask.
He'll sell.
At
least he doesn't sell like super male vitality and colloidal silver.
Right. The only worthwhile thing George Norrie's ever done on Coast to Coast was when he told the story about how he burned his mouth on a Hot Pocket and had to go to the hospital. Have you heard that?
No.
You got to go on YouTube and look it up sometime. It's the funniest thing I've ever heard. He spends 10 minutes talking about how he burned his mouth on a Hot Pocket and got 2nd-degree burns.
So terrible.
I love listening to like the old Art Bell shows. Those are great.
Art Bell is the best. I have to say Art Bell is the best part of Coast to Coast.
Well, the thing about Art Bell was he would he would allow the person to tell their story without agreeing. Right? Like he would allow the person, they could tell a fantastic story and he would just be like, oh, so then the aliens, they talk to you? And they'd be like, yeah, this is what they said. And he'd be like, oh, that's something.
Yeah, you could always kind of tell when he didn't believe it.
Right, but he wouldn't like Norrie. He's like, wow, that's fantastic. Amazing. So,
yeah.
Norrie just kind of bought everything hook, line, and sinker. He sounded like he bought everything,
Yeah, maybe
Where
Art
Art Bell
a lot better at selling his disbelief than Art Bell was.
Art Bell was just like, yeah, it's fine. It's 2 a.m, so we're just going to talk about this a little bit.
Right.
So comfy. I don't think there's another show on the internet that's as comfy as Art Bell doing Coast to Coast.
There's one. It's called The Paranormies Present the Ahnenerbe Hour. I don't know if you ever heard of it.
Oh man, that show is so comfy.
Up-and-coming paranormal show. They're
Fifth-
currently the third best alt-right, fifth best paranormal alt-right show.
Oh, you said third. We skipped up 2 spaces. Nice.
Yeah, we've come to third place now, so we're doing good.
Nice. But as far as comfy
getting
podcasts
back to the
go,
whole idea, I've seen the word comfy on Twitter a few times on our messages, so I know that people think we're comfy, which is cool.
They like it. Well, I was gonna say another comfy podcast is the Fatherland.
Very comfy. Sorry.
Which is where Salty comes from. You are one of the regulars on the Fatherland, the Dadcast. Is that correct?
I'm a semi-regular. I haven't
semi-regular. You've been on all 3 episodes I've been on, so you're as regular as me. So
was it 3? Wow.
I think it's 3. Yeah, I know, right? Right.
Are we including Mania?
Maybe. Probably. I don't know. I was probably kicked off of that one for being too drunk, but hey, whatever. No, but that's what you do. You guys do the Dadcast. You do fatherly advice and dad stories and stuff.
The Fatherland, theoretically a show about being a right-wing dad. In reality, it's just a bunch of middle-aged or nearing middle-aged guys talking about cars and lawn care and shoe polishing.
So basically dad shit. That's literally dad stuff. You have just literally talked about dad stuff.
It's like hanging out. It's like hanging out with your dad and his friends. Like,
don't deny it, accept it, just embrace it. You're becoming one of us, okay? It happens.
I will tell you what though, the bands are on fire on that show now that we got Ryan back.
Oh, nice. I'm glad Ryan's back. How's he doing?
He's good, man. I guess he's gonna go surfing and he's gonna get up.
Good. I like Ryan a lot. Ryan's a good dude. He was on the one the episode where I said I was getting the family back together, and he was very excited about that. And then womp womp womp, yeah. Ryan, yeah. Anyways, back to the Paranormies part of this. So we've covered Jaques Vallee. We've covered his books. We've covered aliens. We've covered all kinds of cool shit. Rational skepticism. Shit. Have we missed anything at all on this? I mean, I'm sure we still need another 15 minutes of content, Graham.
Oh no. Well, we can talk about the idea of skepticism versus debunking.
Yeah, do that actually, because I want to hear you guys' opinion on that. Because you guys know that I have a tendency as a conspiracy theory fan to go down the road of a conspiracy until I'm like for weeks, and I'm like, oh fuck, it's fake. But then it took me 2 weeks and I wasted all that time. You guys know what I mean.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I get it.
Yeah, I want to believe the conspiracies. I want to believe the X-Files, the answer is out there, whatever. I want to believe the government's lying to us. I want to believe this, whatever. So go ahead and enlighten me, you guys.
You want to go ahead, Scott?
Oh, I was just thinking we could talk about kind of the the professional skeptics, I guess you could call them, or the debunkers, people like James Randi, who don't believe anything, no matter what the evidence is for it. He's got, what is it? He has a $1 million paranormal prize or some shit, but you have to do it under laboratory conditions. And I'm sorry, it's not how the paranormal works.
Isn't his challenge though for psychic phenomenon?
It could be. I'm not entirely sure. I just know he's kind of an asshole.
Yeah.
But I read a funny short story once, and the punchline was basically that Randy is some sort of powerful psychic, and he invites all these people to prove their abilities.
And shuts them down.
Yeah, he shuts them down by taking away their abilities and stealing them for himself, which I think would actually be way better than him just being an asshole.
Yeah. No, there's definitely an industry. There's an industry of debunking and skepticism. And I want to say there's even like a magazine called like Rational Thought or Rational Skeptic or something. But in reality, it's super fucking like Snopes style about their, debunking, where they're like, well, partially true. What actually happened is, that's what happened, but that wasn't the reason, where you could never actually have these people say something is true. And, what Johnny said is funny to me about, go way down the rabbit hole on something before he realizes that he wasted his time. That's what I think anybody who's interested in this stuff or getting into it, or even if you're a veteran, you have to develop or know that, like when you're reading some sketchy web page at like 3 a.m. and it's like, it looks like it's from 1999 and it's a bunch of like copied and pasted text. This shit's been around. You're reading like the millionth, like copy of that, and there's some things just to really look out for. Like one is like circular referencing, like a paper will reference another paper, and there's never actually any meat to it. They're all just like referencing each other. Yeah. Referencing like well-known events that everyone just assumes. Therefore, because we keep referencing it, we know that this is what happened then. But then you actually look, it's like, well, it's not proven that that's what happened then. It's open to debate. It's open to interpretation. And one thing you guys, we're really getting back to like the Dolce thing. Like I read that in like 1997, and it was called like the Dolce Papers, and. Right. And like it was like a 20 chapter thing, and it was like somebody's bad fucking fan fiction. And one of you pointed out, like, some of this stuff is like it was way too detailed. Like the amount of detail, like this guy wouldn't know these things.
Oh yeah, the janitor or whatever.
Oh yeah. The janitor's fucking files. Those were ridiculously detailed. Right,
and it's like top secret organizations, they run under a compartmentalization, right? It's like nobody ever knows. Nobody ever has a big picture. They're only looking at a tiny little piece. And if you know too much, you're cycled out, you're moved somewhere else. So these organizations are not going to be incompetent. And so like that's a major red flag. Anytime too much detail, too specific about certain things. Like one of the things that really tripped up like Bob Lazar, which I really love Bob Lazar and the tale of Bob Lazar and all that. But like he was so bold as to say, okay, the element that the alien craft are using is element 115, which if anyone's familiar with the XCOM games, even the original one and the later ones, like that's where they get that from, this fucking guy named Bob Lazar.
Yeah.
And then like people, theoretical physicists, they look at this and like, well, element 115 is like not a stable element. Like there's no way that you could have like a quantity of it exist for more than like half of a second in a laboratory. And they do the math, and they've, there's some nerds out there who really went through his shit and like debunked it on like a legitimate level that I could say debunking. Now they might be wrong. There might be a stable isotope of 115 that's, orbiting Zeta Reticuli created under some different, astral forces. But I mean, you when you get too specific, you have things like that are able to be pointed at and say, well, that's not true.
Right. I think that's where a lot of disinfo comes from, is nailing these things down on specifics, and then the specifics turn out to be incorrect. And naturally, if you find out that the specifics of something are incorrect, most people are going to assume, okay, well, the whole thing's probably bullshit. And I think that if I had a vested interest in making people not believe in, say, aliens or government projects or whatever, I would probably tell the truth about some of it, and then I would mix in a little bullshit. And exactly what you're talking about, like the element 115 is exactly the kind of thing I'd say, because I'd be like, okay, we know this can't be a stable isotope or whatever, so we'll say that's what the alien crafts run on, and then anyone who believes it looks like an idiot. So I think that it's kind of I think there's kind of a golden mean in between believing everything you hear and being skeptical of everything you hear. And you have to kind of, I don't know, I guess discernment is the word I used earlier. I think that's probably a good word for it.
That's a great word. You
have to kind of have the wisdom to understand and ask questions, like the janitor thing that you brought up. Like, you know, I know John's had a clearance. I've had a clearance. I worked, you know, in intelligence when I was in the Army. And so I think that kind of helped in a way, because you know how these things are run. And for these people to be like, oh, I had a, you know, blah, blah, blah clearance, like, you know, A, it probably doesn't even exist.
Yeah, I had a top secret Zulu whiskey foxtrot.
Yeah.
No.
Yeah, like, no. And I remember
being a
teenager.
I had an SCI. SCI is, you know.
Yeah. Well, they're all SCI because
at this point
you have the compartmented information. Like, I remember being like a teenager and going on the Above Top Secret website, and that's another really bad one as far as chronic believers go. Like, I could get on there tonight and make up some bullshit and have like 50 followers in my cult by the end of the night, you know?
Yeah.
And I remember on there, they had like levels of clearances and stuff, like rainbow clearance, all this shit.
Yeah, it was like a Zulu, a Zulu rainbow Alpha 4.
Like, A, how are you getting this information? Because, you know, if this shit's so secret that the names of the clearances can't get out, how are you getting this information in the first place? And B, how can you verify any of it? Like, it's unverifiable.
That's another big one. And of course, anything in this is going to be unverifiable. But just the more outlandish the claim, you know, I mean, harder it is to believe.
I get what you're saying about, you know, anything is unverifiable, but I think some things are more unverifiable than others. Like, if I say, you know, that the planet Nibiru is in between Saturn and, you know, Jupiter right now, and it's careening towards the Earth, well, you know, I should be able to back that up in some way. Like, you know, I can get out a fucking telescope and be like, here it is.
It's behind the sun, though.
Right, exactly. So,
it's always behind the sun.
If it's behind the sun, you should be able. Well, then it's never going to come to the Earth if it's always behind the sun.
No, right at the last minute. Right now, actually, you can start to see it poking out at dusk.
Yeah. So that's the thing. Like, if you think about it, it doesn't make any sense. Whereas you have something else like ghost sightings. Now, can you verify any specific ghost sighting? No, probably not. But at the same time, there have been so many ghost sightings that you can say, you know, hey, if even 1% of these are real, there's something happening. So I don't think it's necessarily a binary of is it verifiable or is it not verifiable. I think it's more of a spectrum of how believable is this, and can we use kind of reasoning and logic to say there might be something to it or there might not be something to it. Another example is psychic phenomena, like you know, people being able to influence number generators and things like that. I know the CIA did work with that stuff for a number of years. And there's laboratory stuff by, I can't remember any of the scientists' names off the top of my head, but there are a few scientists who did work with this stuff, and they say, yeah, it's a real phenomenon. Or remote viewing is another one I think is probably real, because people have been able to describe things that they shouldn't rationally been able to describe, like the designs of certain like Soviet bases and stuff. So I think, I mean, to kind of wrap up my point, I think that you can have discernment about things, and you can have an idea of what's real and what's not without having necessarily being able to prove everything. You just have to kind of have a good bullshit detector, and you have to kind of logically say, why would this be the case? Or, you know, why would X, Y, and Z do this or not do this or whatever? So I don't know. I don't think that everything is necessarily true. I think you can kind of at least make an educated guess on what's true and what isn't.
That was very well put.
Yeah, that was good. Speaking of what are we talking about? was gonna say
Balthazar.
I was gonna say astral projection, but I didn't mean astral projection. But remote viewing. Remote viewing. Yeah, no, we're gonna actually get Jason Giorgiani on to talk about that.
Oh, that'd be great. I really think the remote viewing stuff is interesting.
The remote viewing stuff is really cool. I literally just got his book about 4 days ago, and I can only read so many books at once because I only have two eyes. But I'm gonna get into that, and we're gonna get Jason Giorgiani on to talk about remote viewing and his other astrally things that he talks about. Aliens, anti-Semitism, and academia. So, you know.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm not too familiar with his stuff. I know he wrote the Atlas and Prometheus book, but I'm not really familiar with a lot.
Yeah, that's the one. I literally just got Atlas and Prometheus like 2 days ago. Okay. But at the same time, I'm also reading that book. I'm also reading Passport to Magonia, trying to catch up for this thing. I'm also reading the Them and Us: How Neanderthal Predation Created Modern Humans by Danny Vendramini, the Australian scientist that is debunking the Neanderthal theory. So
debunking it how? Like
debunking it as in how you guys have seen throughout recent history, like Neanderthals are like so easy a caveman can do it. It's like they're making the caveman, the big brain Neanderthal, out to be like this peaceful, funny, whatever. Yeah, when the reality is that the Neanderthal was an apex predator, very angry, violent, cannibalistic. When they ran out of prey, they ate their own.
You know who else does that to this day? Aborigines.
Interesting. Yeah,
don't eat their babies. I'm not even.
No, I know. No, I know. I know you're not. That's like but they're the same as us, Scott. They're the same as us. Same as us.
Oh, that's a good point. Yeah, I didn't consider that.
Yeah. No, 58 genders, one race. Okay.
I thought there was only one gender, the human.
Don't make me break. No, it's the human. It's 58 genders, one race, the human race. Don't make me break my fucking Dr. Bill Nye out on you. Is Dr. Bill Nye right now?
I think I got those.
He's gotten like 65 on. Bill Nye has gotten like 64 honorary doctorates from 37 different universities.
And
anyways,
and one bachelor's that wasn't honorary.
One bachelor's that he actually earned in mechanical engineering. Yeah.
No, I got those backwards. I thought there were 58 races and one gender. So this really,
I mean, literally,
politics up
literally, you could have flipped it, and it'd be literally the same argument, pretty much, probably.
Right.
But no, but we're gonna have.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
No. Go ahead. Go ahead. You go about Neanderthals.
I was gonna say, I seem to remember something about Neanderthals. A lot of the times, they would hunt their prey, not like humans and stuff, but they would hunt like wild boars and stuff, basically by jumping on their back and riding them to the ground and like eating their throats out.
Well, the theory of the Neanderthal being the big-brained, peaceful, smart hominid is actually false, and Horace and I have been talking about this recently. He's the one who got me into it. So we're gonna get into that into another once I get through this book, which I'm gonna get through once I get through the other 37 fucking books that I'm reading. And yes, hey, I read books. Yeah, it's gay. I don't care. Okay, you guys, I don't
gay and nerdy.
Johnny Monoxide confirmed gay and nerdy. Fine. Okay. Whatever.
I'm also reading a book right now. I'm reading
so gay right now, Scott?
Yeah. I'm reading the PK Man book that we're going to do a show on at some point. Supposedly there's this guy who had the ability to control weather and such. And going back to the whole bullshit detector, hearing that sets off the bullshit detector. But what's interesting about it... Right. There's reasons I actually think this guy might be legit, such as he would send letters to people saying what he was going to do. And
then it would happen.
Letters,
right?
And then it would happen, yeah. What's it called when they mark the date? Is it postmarked when they mark the envelope at the post office?
Mm-hmm. They postmarked it, the envelope, yeah.
Yeah. So there was actual evidence. He would postmark these letters and send them to journalists and stuff, and they don't happen. So I'm about a third of the way through that, and whenever I finish, we can.
Well, you read your gay book, I'll read my gay book, and
right.
Yeah. Well, your book, you're reading it because the chapter titles are chapter 1, chapter 2, chapter 3. They're not giving you a description in the chapter.
Yeah, I have to actually read. It's terrible.
I told you it would happen to you.
Yeah.
Salty man, thanks for coming on, dude.
Yeah, it was a pleasure. I can talk about this shit for hours, so it was a lot of fun.
Well, I am going to hold you to that and have you come back on again. How about that?
Sounds good, man.
I'm going to cash you online, nigga. How about that?
Okay.
I'm Johnny Monoxide, Scott Taylor, and Saul TC Mann. We have been the Paranormies Presents the Ahnenerbe Hour. We will talk to you next week. We're going to take you out with a creepypasta read to you by our friend Bradshaw Wilson. We'll talk to you later.
Reading books makes you gay.
I had never been sure what to expect when my wife cooked. She was always on blogs finding recipes that, in all honesty, were above her skill level. Not trying to be rude, but there we are. I was hardly surprised when one evening she mentioned I found a recipe for something we've never tried before. She rolled her tongue as a drum roll and said, "We're going to have boar." "Honey," I tiptoed, "where did you find boar around here? Aren't those big dirty pigs from Kenya or a rainforest or something?" She waved me off. "Hush, I'm trying to broaden our horizons. Imagine when the Darevilles visit. We'll get to say we've been eating wild boar. How extravagant. How many days will we spend in the hospital?" "Douglas, what did you say?" "How do you think she'll respond, dear?" She eyed me suspiciously before shooting me a knowing smile and crooning, "She'll be terribly jealous. I know she's always been jealous that I married you, but I still like to remind her that I always finish first." "Of course you do, my love." Mind you, Mrs. Dareville and I had been seeing each other secretly for months. I had been wondering if she knew about us. We've had a few close calls. She'd come home from the store early, and the lovely Mrs. Dareville would have to run out the back door half-dressed. I never minded the view, but always wished she didn't have to leave. She'd even gone as far to get a tattoo of a bear on that little behind after the nickname she gave me. It always gave me a smile. "Now go wash up so you can help me set the table." As I went to the wash, she opened up the oven, and I smelled an aroma so sweet, so succulent, it was as if it snared me by the nose and pulled me back to the kitchen. "You never told me where you ended up finding boar, honey." "Oh, somewhere nearby," she teased sweetly. "I had a feeling you already had a taste for it. You know, I think I just might." We sat down to one of the best dinners we've ever had. She had a spark in her I hadn't seen in a long time. The kind of spark that Mrs. Dareville had used to lure me into her bed with ease. She smiled at me. I smiled back. "So what do you think?" Mid-chew, I replied. "You know, it's good. I've never thought I'd like boar." "Oh, silly me. Did I say it was boar? I meant to say whore," she giggled. "I've never cooked whore before." "Whore?" Mid-sentence, she took a still bloody steak off the serving platter and slapped it onto the bare wooden table. "I told you I found it nearby. I actually picked it up next door." On the back side of the steak, there was a small patch of skin left on the cut of meat. I could just make out the picture of a bear on the seared flesh. "I knew you'd like it."